Welcome to Bible Story with Ojits.
In the grand tapestry of history, there are moments that echo through eternity, whispers of divine purpose that ripple across the ages. These are not always the cataclysmic battles or the crowning of kings, but sometimes they are the quiet, profound moments of revelation, where heaven touches earth and unveils a glimpse of a plan far greater than our own. Today, we journey back to millennia, not to a throne room or a battlefield, but to the heart of ancient Judea, to witness a pivotal, yet often overlooked, chapter in the greatest story ever told. We will walk the dusty roads to Jerusalem, feel the pulse of a sacred city, and stand in the shadow of the Holy Temple to behold the story of a boy on the cusp of manhood who was already more than he seemed. This is the story of the boy in the temple, a tale of divine wisdom, parental anguish, and a prophetic declaration that would forever alter the course of human destiny. Our story begins not with a thunderous pronouncement, but with the simple, rhythmic tradition of a faithful family. Imagine the scene. The roads leading to Jerusalem are alive, teeming with pilgrims from every corner of Galilee, Judea, and beyond. The air hums with anticipation, a symphony of languages, the bleating of sacrificial lambs, and the heartfelt recitation of psalms. This is the annual pilgrimage for Passover, the most sacred of all Jewish festivals, a commemoration of liberation and a testament to God's covenant with His people. Among the throng, we find a humble family from the small, unassuming town of Nazareth. Joseph, a carpenter of quiet strength and steadfast faith. Mary, a mother whose heart holds ponderings of angelic visitations and celestial promises. And with them, their son, Jesus, now 12 years old. At this age, a Jewish boy stood at the threshold of spiritual maturity, considered a son of the commandment. For Jesus, this journey was more than a tradition, it was a divine appointment. As they traveled, the landscape shifted from the rolling green hills of Galilee to the rugged, sun-drenched terrain of Judea. With every step, they drew closer to the city that was the epicenter of their faith, the earthly dwelling place of God's glory, Jerusalem. The holy city, perched majestically upon its hills, with the magnificent temple of Herod gleaming like a mountain of snow and gold under the Middle Eastern sun. It was a sight designed to inspire awe, to remind every soul of the majesty and power of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This sacred setting, this city of prophets and kings, was the chosen stage for a quiet, yet monumental, revelation. The journey itself was a prayer, a physical manifestation of a spiritual yearning to be closer to God. And for the young Jesus, it was a homecoming in a way no one, not even his own parents, could yet fully comprehend. Upon arriving in Jerusalem, the family would have immersed themselves in the rituals of the Passover week. The solemn Seder meal, the unleavened bread, the prayers, and the sacrifices all served to reconnect them with their history and their God. For 7 days, the city was a whirlwind of sacred activity. But as the festival concluded and the great crowds began their journey homeward, our narrative takes a dramatic turn. Amid the caravans and the departing families, a quiet crisis was unfolding. As was the custom, men and women often traveled in separate groups, with the children moving between them. Joseph and Mary, assuming Jesus was with friends or other relatives in the large company from Nazareth, traveled for a full day before the quiet and ease in their hearts turned to stark realization. He was not with them. The sun was setting on their first day's journey, and their son, the child of promise, was missing. The weight of that discovery is impossible to overstate. This was not merely a lost child. This was the child whose birth was heralded by angels, the one they were entrusted to protect. Their journey back to Jerusalem was not a pilgrimage of faith but a frantic, desperate search. Every shadow in the winding alleys, every face in the bustling marketplaces, would have been a source of both hope and despair. Imagine Mary's heart, the heart that had treasured up all these things and pondered them, now pierced with a sword of fear and sorrow. Imagine Joseph's burden, the guardian of God's own son, now retracing his steps through a sprawling city, his soul heavy with responsibility and dread. For 3 agonizing days, they searched. 3 days of sleepless nights and relentless seeking. 3 days that foreshadowed another, darker period of 3 days that would one day engulf the world in sorrow. Their search was a testament to their love, a frantic, human response to a developing divine drama. The city that had been a place of celebration was now a labyrinth of anxiety. After 3 days that must have felt like an eternity, their search led them back to the one place they had not yet thought to look, the temple. And there, in one of the temple courts, surrounded by the most learned men in Israel, the scribes, the doctors of the law, the spiritual elite, they found him. But he was not lost. He was not afraid. He was home. The scene they stumbled upon was one of utter astonishment. The great teachers, men who had dedicated their lives to the study of the Torah and the prophets, were captivated. They sat listening to this 12-year-old boy, their faces a mixture of wonder and disbelief. He wasn't just reciting scripture, he was engaging with them, asking questions of such profound depth and offering answers of such startling clarity that they were amazed at his understanding. In the presence of this boy from Nazareth, the accumulated wisdom of generations was being challenged and illuminated. The wisdom of Solomon, the fire of Elijah, the vision of Isaiah, it was all present, distilled into the mind of a child. This was not the precociousness of a gifted student, this was the effortless brilliance of divine wisdom itself, revealed. And in that sacred space, Mary's relief gave way to a mother's gentle rebuke. "Son, why have you treated us so? Behold, your father and I have been searching for you in great distress." Her words, so human and relatable, met with a reply that transcended the moment, a reply that echoed from eternity. Jesus looked at them, not with defiance, but with a serene, otherworldly certainty, and asked the question that would redefine his identity forever: "Why were you looking for me? Did you not know that I must be about my Father's business?" In that single sentence, the veil was lifted. He was not just Joseph's son, he was God's son. His Father's business was not in a carpenter's shop, but in the redemption of mankind. It was the first recorded utterance of Jesus in the Gospels, a prophetic declaration of his mission, his identity, and his ultimate destiny. The weight of his words hung in the air, a profound mystery that Mary and Joseph could not yet fully grasp. They had found their son, but they had also encountered their Lord in a new and startling way. With the Passover festival over and their search concluded, the Holy Family began the journey back to their simple life in Nazareth. The return journey must have been vastly different from the one that brought them to Jerusalem. It was a quieter, more contemplative trip. The joy of finding Jesus was mingled with the awe and confusion of his declaration. As they left the grandeur of the holy city and returned to the obscurity of their Galilean village, they carried a new understanding, a heavier and more glorious secret. The Son of God was returning to a carpenter's home. The King of Kings was going back to a life of submission and ordinary work. This period of his life, from age 12 to 30, is often called the silent years. But silence does not mean inactivity. In Nazareth, Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature, and in favor with God and man. It was a period of humble preparation, a quiet, steady growth. He was learning the trade of his earthly father, honoring his mother, and living a life of perfect, unassuming obedience. It was the calm before the dawn of his ministry, the deep, deliberate intake of breath before the world-changing Sermon on the Mount. In the simplicity of Nazareth, the divine was being woven into the fabric of the everyday, preparing for the day when the carpenter's son would lay down his tools and take up his cross. This humble return, this quiet growth, was an essential part of the divine plan, a testament to the fact that true greatness is nurtured not in the spotlight of fame, but in the fertile ground of faithful, humble service. From the vibrant pilgrimage to the frantic search, from the astonishing revelation in the temple to the quiet return to Nazareth, the story of the 12-year-old Jesus is a microcosm of his entire life and mission. It is a story that speaks to the journey of every soul that seeks its true home, its ultimate purpose. It reminds us that even in our youth, God can reveal a calling that transcends our understanding, a purpose that is woven into the very fabric of our being. His words, "I must be about my Father's business," are a call to action for all of us. They challenge us to look beyond the immediate, the temporary, and the expectations of the world, and to ask ourselves what our true Father's business is for our lives. This single episode, nestled between the Nativity and the beginning of his public ministry, serves as a divine signpost, pointing to the incredible truth of who Jesus was and what he came to do. It is an invitation to seek him, not just in the grand cathedrals or on sacred pilgrimages, but in the temples of our own hearts, and to listen for that same voice of divine wisdom. The boy in the temple was a promise of a teacher greater than the scribes, a king greater than David, and a savior who would ultimately make the entire world his father's house. And in understanding his journey, we find the courage to embark on our own.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.